Kobe Bryant has this really iconic interview that he did where they won, I think, game two of the finals against, I want to say Orlando. And the interviewer was like asking him, he was like, well, you guys won game two. Like, are you excited? And Kobe was just like, job's not finished. But if you win two, you're on the trajectory to like kind of win. Job's not done. For a lot of us, the album being out is the finish line. Like, we did it. But for me, I look at the album being out as the midway point. We won game two. There's two more games we got to win, and that's promoting it. And then that's also like getting it to really resonate with people. Game three, get it promoted. Game four, get it to inspire.
Josh Williams, also known
Hey,
as Eyes. Welcome back to the show.
yeah, I appreciate you for having me back on, Nigel. It's definitely cool to see that you're still putting out content. I've seen some of the other interviews, and then it's also just like, yeah,
Yeah, it's
let's go.
been just about a year, I think. I think I
Hmm.
started the show January last year, so um, just about a year. Pretty cool, I
Well, let's
guess.
clap it up for you getting to a year because that's the consistency is king is what they always say. So it's dope just seeing like you having this and seeing some of the other people you brought on board and watching some of the episodes.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Well, let's jump right into one of the main reasons we're getting together today is that new album
Mhm.
uh, with everything going on. I listened to it probably nonstop since you sent the link, but I'm that's kind of how I am whenever I'm really diving into an album. I'll just listen to it over and over again. Um,
Appreciate that. Thank you.
but give me the lowdown on, I guess, conceptually from the start. Like, what was the goal with this project?
So yeah, with everything going on, was definitely a project that has like it took a really first of all it took a really long time to produce, probably longer than it should have. But it was a thing where when the pandemic hit, we were like as a group we collectively were like, hey, we should probably still figure out a way to make music remotely, and maybe we have an album that's like our pandemic album. And we were anticipating multiple bands doing that, but then it kind of turned into a thing where as we started the development of just having, hey, we got to make this remotely, I'll share this with you, you share this with me, we started to realize we had like the identity of a project that felt like it deserved us being in person and playing the actual songs all together. So it kind of just became like this aspirational album that's like, yo, when we all are able to be in the same spot again, this is the thing we're gonna put out. So it was kind of like I don't know, like a goal of ours, just to be like, yo, when we get with everything going on, we go out, like we'll be in the studio and we'll also be so much better musicians and have developed this idea for quite a bit of time to where the I think the starting idea of the project, like the original name of it was actually Quarantine Dreams. And then there was an artist by the name Eli Capella who, like, literally, I think 3 weeks into lockdown, put out a project with that name, and we're like, oh, well, so so we
Yeah,
we we workshopped it more, but then it just became a thing where, like, the idea of with everything going on, like every individual in the group had their own different trials and tribulations that they were kind of going through, and they kind of brought that into the project. And then it's a really good like snapshot of a lot of different emotions that people were feeling during that time. But I also feel like we made it because we kind of bury the lead. More often than not, when I do interviews, I actually don't bring up the fact that we made it in the pandemic. But like we made it to where the emotions and the sentiments that are felt in the project can be universal to just like when you're going through tumultuous times, or like when you're like just about to break free out of whatever you feel like is confining you. Obviously, our confines were literally home, but like we started to make it feel more universal, and I think that's when the project really got really good. And especially when we even said explicitly, we were like, hey, let's not reference the pandemic at all, so this thing can have a little bit more uh universality to it, rather than it just being like, oh, that's the pandemic album, you know.
yeah. I definitely feel that listening through. Um, I got this sense of not chaos in the sense of it wasn't cohesive, but kind of like internal chaos, like all these emotions going on, and you get it from the title, like with everything that's going on. It's kind of the the battle against all the pressures and things and obstacles that pop up in life. And I had
Mhm.
no idea that it was recorded during the pandemic. So you guys definitely um, kept it to that more universal and more long lasting impact without referencing a
Appreciate it.
date or a time frame. It was very, very
Uh,
cool.
oh yeah, and it's like I think the thing about whenever we make music, because like we're like a live hip hop band, so we have a lot of inspiration um from older acts that were, like during our current era of music. The bands aren't necessarily the most prominent like thing. Like it's typically individual solo artists and producers. But a thing that I found that like is really interesting about just like live communal music where it's like multiple people all playing together is like we're tapping into the root of what like humans use to connect with each other, like in the sense of just like music is almost this universal force that's been present with us for a really long time. But I think about like those older bands that we used to listen to, they were based in the 60s and they were based in the 70s, and they have these elements of like talking about their current time, but being able to project it out to where a kid who was born in like the 90s can relate to an artist who wrote something in like 1965. You know what I mean? So there's a part of us being like, we want to make this have a certain level of longevity of just its connection to like, the human experience and not like very dated. So that way it's just like you could play this for someone 30 years from now, and like I feel all the emotions of what this place like time period was, even though I might not have been, alive during that time period. Even that's kind of the goal that we kind of set out. And even just with the title, like you said, like with everything going on, like I feel like it's something that you'll hear people say just in their day to day, like when they're going through a lot, like like with everything going on, I just need a break. With everything going on, I kind of just like I need to take a nap, you know.
And were there specific inspirations, people, bands, maybe just life events? What
I
were
mean,
specific in the pandemic though?
oh yeah, I'll say like the specific of like I have so and the beautiful thing is, and I know that we're going to be doing some other interviews like with different members. Is like each member of the band had an opportunity to basically create a prompt of like, hey, I want to make a song around this, and then depending on their discipline, they would approach it differently. So for instance, like Devin is more of a what's the word? He's a composer. So he's like the lead composer for a lot of the music, where he had his experiences in college that were kind of influencing him very heavily. So like for some of those songs where you kind of hear these things like expectations and like these things of like longing for something to be really great, but then it just gets kind of ripped away from you. Like it fits his experience, and he melodically like was playing keys and like writing the chord progressions and giving us the prompt of like, yo, I want this to be a song that like feels like you're this close to having a good time, and then it's just like, whoa, it's gone. And so like everyone has their own different takes and where they were at. I know a big one for me is like the musical inspiration. Um, like I'm a huge Jimi Hendrix fan and I'm a huge Marvin Gaye fan. So even like things like the title being like with everything going on, it's slight homage to Marvin Gaye's like What's Going On, like that type of title where it's like, Marvin Gaye was writing about all the troubles of the world and like encapsulating it in his perspective, but making it universal for people to feel what he was feeling during his that those particular times in his life. And I think what's going on was very much influenced by the Vietnam War and his brother coming back and sharing stories about him, what he experienced there. So I think like with everything going on is like an example of Branch Station giving you an insight to like the emotional state that they were experiencing during like a very tumultuous 2 years. A big one for me, like there's small stuff in the sense of like events. Um, like there's a song called Lanes. It's one of the songs that like I wrote the prompt for, but it was this thing where during the pandemic I could I'm an avid runner, so I do like long distance running, and at the same time I'm also a black man, so like if I'm running in some suburbs, it's just it's I have to be a bit more cautious and careful. But
Right.
and I feel like you remember even from high school, like I ran a lot. But there was a thing where when I was running during that time period, there was like no police, there was no traffic, and I was literally like, I could just run in the middle of the street, and I did. And
Mm,
so like that little experience made me really be like, oh, like this is something like this is a very freeing experience. There's a thing of me being like, uh, it's weird. I kind of put it in the sense of like, oh, this is what it like feels like to like be an American, but doesn't have like an asterisk aside of it. Like I think about like I have neighbors that I have in the suburbs where they run, and I'm certain every time they run, they don't think about police. They don't think about like anything. There's just a certain level of freedom that they kind of get to experience that like anytime I'm running, and mind you, like even in my history, like anytime I run in a new neighborhood, like there's a potential for me to get pulled over. Like I've been pulled over like 4 times running in my life, and I'm like, damn, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
like songs like Lanes that have that slight like political tinge, but also are literally just from an experience of running, literally running through the lanes, or just like those small things that like kind of really influenced it. And then the only other one I would definitely say is like from a personal perspective. Like I was taking care of my grandmother at the time during like her last few years of life. We brought her home, so there was definitely this thing of like, um, you know what's coming and you're fearful of it, but you have to get a certain level of acceptance from it. And then we also like at least for me personally, like I can get a little doom and gloomy to some degree. Not gloomy. I'll say I can be dark. Like I can just shit can get dark with me. There's other members of the group that are way more jovial than I am. Uh, but it's the thing of like, during this like really uncertain time, like there's a potential that we all could die from this shit. You know what I mean? So so like there's even like in the elements of the song that you hear that are like kind of like, yo, like is the world falling apart? Why does this feel so like oppressive and like kind of harsh? That was a lot of me interjecting that into the project. But then also the beauty of Branch Station is like there's other members where like, they had not to say they had a great time during the pandemic, but they're like, oh, I can like express myself creatively and really think about my ideas and just it was like their renaissance era for them where they like learned new instruments or took time to develop different skill sets. And like all of us did, like um for me, like this is the first project that Branch put out where I actually played instruments on it. Because I think when we talked previously, I told you how like I didn't learn to play instruments till much later in life, but I happen to be the leader of one of the best bands I think I've ever met or seen, and all of the musicians in it are 1,000 times better than I am. But it was like, oh, I wrote a progression on this album. That's awesome. Rather than just me always writing verses and writing song concepts, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the instrumentation on this album is excellent, and I want to get to the instruments eventually.
Hmm.
But going back to a little bit earlier, what you're saying about, you know, sounds like each of the writers, or maybe each of the members as a whole, like prompted a song. But even just the vocalists, like you can hear this kind of. I guess I would just describe it as like it felt very raw, like it felt very from the heart, like the music was not made for any other reason than the artist wanted to convey something.
Expression, yeah. And that's for sure definitely kind of the methodology of how we produce the record. So there's a lot of recordings in this album and they're kind of sneaky, you can't always tell. But there's a lot of recordings that are from people in the band during the time of them recording at home. And like we had a choice when we said, "Hey, we're going to come together and like, we're going to come together and do a recording of this album together because we feel like this album's really good even in its like almost demo phase where everything was just done remote sharing and sharing and sharing." But there was a thing where we're like, you know, music to some degree is also a time capsule or a snapshot of a moment in time. So like there's things that you hear like from our vocal producer and arranger, Joy Ross, aka Jay Delay, who's like one of the lead singers in the group, where we were like, she was like, oh, I can go and I could do a more polished take of what I'd recorded at home, like on my bed, like when I was like during lockdown, and then we kind of were like, maybe we should leave it because it's to some of it you can really hear that like resonance of someone being really emotional and vulnerable, but in a space that like almost is isolated, and like how the textures of like the stuff that we recorded in studio have a totally different they have a different quality to them, and even though literally it's a lower quality audio format, but that's just by the nature of when we had to record it. So we started introducing things like adding a little bit of grit and playing with sonics of keeping some of that aesthetic of album that was made in your house, but then also adding the polish of like one of our proudest moments was we have the intro track where we have like an actual horn section on there, which originally was like just a digital thing, but like when we got a horn section on it brightens it up so much, and so it's like this good blend of like polished artistry and like us being real cerebral with how we record, and then also the raw guttural like, hey, I actually did record this. Like for some of them, it's like, hey, I actually did record this like when my grandmother passed, and like I knew that was coming, and I'm like I'm gonna record this when that happens, like roughly, obviously. So like that emotion is just there, and like there's no like faking it or like I have to remember what I felt like when that happened. It's just like this happened 2 weeks ago. Let's go. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, it definitely comes through. I think you guys really captured a lot in a way that doesn't really happen a lot very often anymore. You know, things are
Yeah,
recorded to
appreciate that.
be perfect or to be polished in a kind of sterile way a lot of the time, to be poppy or to be um, appreciated at the level of the masses,
Mm-hmm.
when you know there's a level of depth that you miss when you record for something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Um, and even just I think the biggest thing is that like uh because I'm sure you'll also appreciate this to some degree, even with what you do, is like we were also seeing the transition of music really starting to shift to being uh I hate this word, and I'm sorry for using the term hate, but it's just what it is. Content creators. And it's like uh, watching just all of the massive like arts and disciplines get kind of like truncated just this single box of like content, and even just in the sense of you know calling it content, and like you think about like content also like it's like food, like it's like something that's just like meant to be consumed almost. um we have had like a real pushback in our internally with our group, which is being like, we have to figure out a way to separate ourselves from like being just viewed as like content creators. Like we're musicians, we're artists. Even when I look at like yourself, you're a podcaster, but what that really means is like you're basically an interviewer and also an opinionist to some degree, where you have artistic disciplines that are incorporated in these things that yes become media that people watch and is monetized and XYZ. But at the end of the day, there's an art to this. And I think the big thing that Branch was trying to do with WeGo, or with everything going on, was like really push the artistry above else. Like that was kind of the goal. Like how can we best demonstrate what we do as artists and express ourselves as artists? And then, I think there is a little bit of things where there are songs that we potentially might get placed this year, and we're doing a really big push for like getting placements and trying to get like syncs and licensing deals. But it's like we start off the premise of how do we make really good art, and then we kind of transition into, okay, how do we get to monetize this art? And I think when you start there, you can build a more honest relationship with an audience, because like you're putting your soul out there, and connecting, or people resonate with what you put out there, and they believe in that, so they'll follow you, rather than you listening for what the people want and then trying to craft yourself around what you think someone else wants. Like just make what's in you, and then if a million people love it, cool. If 10 people love it, those 10 people probably rock with you super heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it also comes down to a difference between your motivation behind what you're making, right? If you're a content creator and you're just doing it to make money or to advertise a product or something, then because your motivations are vastly different than someone who's trying to express something about themselves or about their perspective of the world or whatever. It's going to be a different product. And
Oh, for sure.
it's really, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually wasn't going to bring that up, not intentionally, but it wasn't on my mind. But I've heard. Have you heard of like AI music in the
Yes,
recent?
of course I have.
So I've heard AI music even on the radio now,
Mm,
and which that kind of, I don't know what it is about hearing it on the radio, but it kind of blew my mind as far as, because I'm familiar with it and I've even played around with it just to see like how it works.
mm,
But hearing it on the radio and now like seeing it's something that's completely soulless. You know, I don't have anything against AI in general, but that really doesn't have any deeper meaning. There was no thought behind it. Now just being projected out as the consumable art to everyone
mm.
was, I was very upset. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
don't,
mean, because I honestly, this is a fun topic because this, and mind you, I'm cool with promoting WeGo, but like, I also just love these conversations. Like, I can go on about AI for a minute because what happens is that, like, there's an element of truth to the fact that everything is a tool, when it comes to technology. So, like, there's evolutions and changes, and people have to realize how to use the tool, and event like sometimes the technology is scary, and we think of like what is the worst possible thing that can happen from this, but then also maybe some people come along and use it in a way to where it's a benefit. So, like, for just like a quick music history real short, like even when they invented the vinyl record or the record, like live bands were really against the concept of music being recorded and put on something you could purchase because they were concerned that it would lower how much they could sell, live shows, because like normally you'd have to go watch a live show of someone performing a song for you to hear that song. That's the only way you heard that song. So like like older bands, like we're talking like, I would say like like the early 1900s. We're like, no, don't put this on vinyl, then they'll never come out to shows. And like, if you look at the explosion of what the music industry is from the fact that people all over the world can now hear music, it's like, oh, well, maybe the vinyl record wasn't that bad of a thing, and like, it's just a matter of your implementation of it. So when it comes to AI, my personal take is this: there are individuals where, well, there's two fronts. There's a front on the business side of music, and then there's a front on the artistic side of music. On the business side, the concern is obviously that if you get an audience who uh, is okay with, like, I'm talking about the younger generation growing up with this being normalized. If you get an audience that's okay with AI music outright, just straight up AI music, then eventually labels can be like, well, we can cut out the middleman because we don't need musicians anymore. So Branch Station, bye. We'll just have the AI that we have train on all the music we already own to replicate similar things, and then put that out, right? And then if the audience is used to that, let's say we project 50 years in the future where kids born now are, or let's say kids born in like 2040 are just comfortable, just like, oh yeah, I love Robot 725's dubstep album. I don't know why I associate AI with them. Like, they make all different types of music, but like people are like, oh yeah, I love that, and I associate with that. What it turns into is that no longer are you connected to a person; you're connected to whoever owns that bot. Um, and that's scary. Like, that scares the hell out of me. And part of why Branch Station's kind of mission is to try to potentially reintroduce live musicality into the hip hop sphere in particular, because hip hop is like the most popular genre. It's a genre we grew up loving, and like it's been in this mode where the production that's being done now is actually very easy to replicate for a robot. Like, if you listen to most hip hop tracks that are like trap music that doesn't have too much variation or too much chordal changes, or don't even have bridges anymore, you can throw those to a computer and they can really analyze and just replicate something pretty cleanly. Because even when you just think about the fact that music that's produced by producers is just on grid, it's literally made in a computer, so a computer can very easily pull that apart. Um, but when it comes to, for instance, I'm curious, even from your personal perspective, when you listen to AI music that's like replicating, um, let's say 70s and 60s music or music that was made with bands, you can kind of tell it's like more robotic. And the reason for that is because of the fact that the live instrumentation that you hear from the past, it's not on grid because it's like if the song's at 95 BPM, when a human being's playing, there's like what's the word? There's not latency. What's the word I'm looking for? There's human error to account for that changes how a song plays. So a band might play a song at 95 BPM and then slightly go to 96, slightly go to 94, and like that range and that feeling is called groove, and that's like really key for like bass players and drummers. And I think when we last talked, I know you were saying you were doing drums, right? Yeah, so you kind of know where it's like you got to groove with your bass player, and it's not a perfect number. It's just like a feeling. And so like the the fear is like if all of the youth is used to hearing AI stuff, eventually we could be out of here. Like it's just like all right, the kids just like robots. Let's all go home. But the hope is that people have attachments to people. Like we're human. We like to relate with one another. So when you hear the reason why you inherently hear AI music and just like ugh is because you know like there's no you it's like looking at a mannequin like they're dead in the eyes. There's something missing. It's the uncanny valley of audio. um to where like when you hear someone say like yo I wrote this song like after my girlfriend broke up with me and I crashed my car and then like I was just in so much pain and like you hear that in the music, but then when you like hey chat gpt please make a song that sounds like a guy who was in a car accident and also lost his like it's not the same. It literally hits different. So that's on the label side, but then on the artist side, um artists are creative by nature. And if you're truly an artist, you can be given any tool and like think of creatively, how do I use this? So there are people who are like, I just want to make money, so I'm gonna use the AI to make beats and I'm gonna sell the beat. But there's also people who are like, okay, I want to get a sound that sounds like a theremin going through lava. Can I use AI to like cultivate that unique characteristic of a sound, find it, and then use that to implement in my own musical creation? That's dope. Like I love that. There's actually a new story that just came out recently, and it's actually with a Philadelphia legend. Beanie Siegel. Are you familiar with Beanie Siegel at all? Older 2000s hip hop. Yeah. So like Beanie Siegel, iconic artist. One of my that's one of my pop's favorite artists to listen to. Like he would be playing that like in the basement, like when I was a kid. My uncle Steve would play Beanie Siegel, and I liked Beanie Siegel, and I loved Beanie Siegel as I got older and was actually studying hip hop. But a tragic thing happened to Beans where he lost one of his lungs, right? And so his voice has a certain amount of rasp to it, and it's not as powerful as it once was, um, just sonically speaking. And he had a very unique and iconic voice. But with the use of AI and all the records that he's had out before, and mind you, the whole time while his voice is kind of hampered, he still has his mind and he still has his ability to write brilliant, just dope, dope raps, right? So he was working with people to have them train AI to listen to what his voice sounded like before, and then he just has emulators now to where he's still writing the dopest bars he can make, but he's just using the AI to replicate the voice of what he formerly had prior to him having to lose like his lung. And like that stuff is like what I think like and what I'm prayerful for when it comes to artists integrating AI is like we get real creative with how we use it as a tool, but we don't use it as the end all be all of how we create. It's just something else in the arsenal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the delineation you make between as a tool versus kind of taking over what you do, and I think you specifically mentioned it already, but if you're an artist and you really consider yourself an artist, the idea of letting the robot do the art for you is not an option because that's not what your job isn't to get to the end of the song faster or get to the end of the painting faster, right?
No,
Um,
not at all.
but what I will say about the adoption of AI for, let's just say, music in a business perspective is
Mhm.
like a lot of the kids, like for example, in my family, watch YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and they don't even realize when they're consuming AI content. Like sometimes I'll hear and
Yeah.
I'll ask, like, that's an AI voice. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like they don't. So
Hmm.
the clear line that you and I or any really adult could tell when it's an AI voice reading a script on a YouTube short or an AI voice singing a song. Um, is not going to be built in necessarily to
Hmm.
the coming generations repertoire of skills because they're already being they're already growing up on and normalizing the irregularities of
Hmm.
AI is talking instead of like humans talking, right? Or
Yeah,
any
and then
district talking.
the scary part gets that as it gets better, it will get harder to tell on top of that. So like there is a moment in time, and it's also, there's elements of because I even experienced this with the older generations too. Like my grandfather watches YouTube all the time, and I'll be like, same deal. Like, hey, that's like not a guy talking, like that's just a robot. And he's like, what? And it's just like, yeah, like yeah. Um, and it's a thing where even it boils down to that thing we talked about with content too. Characterizing art as content subconsciously strips away some of the value that like you associate with the art. And so when you do that, it's a thing where you also strip away the human aspect of like when you say someone is a when you say someone is, let's say, a carpenter, right? Like you associate that with someone who has to take the time to learn a skill, get really good at the skill to then produce the thing that you get, whether it be like a chair or a table or something like that. But then if we were to just start calling chairs, like, oh, this is furniture content, and we just 3D print it, um, you take out that human element and you don't connect with it. And so obviously I'm using carpenter as an example because it's just like to just kind of explain how odd it would be if we just started calling all utensils and all things regarding furniture as like one particular box. Like if you sit in a ottoman, and if you sit in a like you sit in an ottoman, you sit in a stroller, you sit in a I don't know, a bus chair. Like you're just like, oh, all of these things are the same thing, chair. Well, like that's what they did to art. Like a painting and a radio interview and a let's say, I don't know, what's another form of art? And
Culture.
like dancing, like a choreography. All of that gets just content. It's like it's real easy to just disassociate the people that are involved. And then the sad part is like with art, at the end of the day, the reason that we make it is like because one, the thing about art is like obviously it has no functional reason to exist, but it's like one of the most important things in our world, which is why we put so much money and stock into the creation of art. Like if you think about it, like obviously houses provide shelter, so like that's really important to us. Clothing provides warmth, like really important to us as humans. But like art doesn't have to exist, but we love it, and I think the reason why is because the the true thing about art and what it really is like it's an expression of someone else's existence connecting to someone else that also exists, and you mutually relating to like how, hey, we both exist. Because I even think of art in the sense of like when you look at like cave paintings, even and go that far, like that cave painting is the equivalent of someone being like, hey, Josh was here, and in thousands of years in the future someone else finds it and is like, yo, someone was here and they had something that meant something to them. And like that community and communication is essential to human existence. Like I think I don't know how true the story is because I don't know how you discover this, but like they talk about how like if you had a baby, like a brand new newborn, just not be held by anyone, and you still like had food for it to get and like figured out a way to feed it, but like it just had no human connection to people, more than likely that child would die just from just like a disassociation of like existing with other human beings. Even if you were to like put like an IV to keep it alive, like it would just like die from isolation almost. And I think that because of how like, and I again, I don't know if a dude like put a baby in a corner and just like watch that happen to discover that, because that's dark.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully it was just like a scientist was able to figure out the math or something. But like I think because and connection and human connectivity is that intrinsic and necessary for our survival, even though we don't view it as the essentials as like, housing, shelter, food. Um, that part of it is why we care about it so much. Like so even when like I know for instance when like there's people we never meet that create art, and then when they pass there's such a deep sense of loss for someone that you never met. So like I know for my squad, like a big one this last year was Quincy Jones passing, and like for some of my members like in the group, like Devin and Jadele, and even I would assume every member was like, "Yo, I really wanted us to become like prominent enough to meet some of these individuals before they pass," because it's like that's like we have this fun joke where I know when I was growing up, I was a huge DMX fan, and like I used to say like DMX is like my music dad. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so when like DMX passed, and mind you, I have never met DMX. The closest I got to DMX was I did go to his studio in Yonkers to record a session that people were doing in the studio. But when DMX died, I was just like, damn, and it felt like my uncle passed or something like that, like because that's how much the music that he made resonated with me as a kid, and I grew up, and even to the sense of like how aggressive I am on stage, and like just like some of the guttural nature of how I like pronounce shit, like
Mhm.
is him resonating in me and influencing me, and that connectivity was crucial to me, like even wanting to rap to begin with. So it's like there is this human connectivity part of art that is so important, that my hope is that as they try to continuously push AI, there may come a time where like even with the kids, like the kids might be like, "Oh yeah, I listen to AI music, but like my favorite artist of all time is like a real person, because like they told this one story that like felt like it was my story, or they told a story that like I related to so much." And there's hope for the next generation. They got a lot to do, and we got a lot to do to support them too. But like, I
Yeah.
think in time there will be this slight rejection where it's like, hey, just use AI to write like papers for like business stuff. Don't pull this shit into the arts, please.
So I'm going to share a quote with you because I think it's kind of in line, not exactly with AI, but um, it's a quote from, I believe it's Snoop Dogg. It's from a
Nice.
song.
Whose
It
voice
is,
has been used for AI all the time now.
yeah, yeah. I think the quote is, I might not have verbatim, but essentially, if it ain't if it ain't hot, it don't mean shit.
Mm,
Sense so if the music, right? Obviously, we're talking about in the context of AI, like if it's not real, it really made by a person, it literally doesn't mean anything, right? It's just interpretive. But
mm,
the sense of, let's say, going back to your album and your group's album, the sense of so much of the meaning that people get out of music is
mm.
tied to how good it sounds, right? So if DMX was
Yeah,
bad, but still just as, you know, um, active or aggressive or whatever the other traits that you appreciated about him,
mm,
he wouldn't have gotten big enough for you to even know who he was, right?
for
So
sure. Yeah.
so it's kind of a balance, or I'm curious how you look at it as far as making sure your music sounds as appealing as possible, and also carrying on, the message that we've already gone into a bit earlier.
Oh, for sure. So the challenge is sometimes also there is a certain level of self-reflection where you have to listen to music and also think about like what your goal is in the sense of putting out a message. Who are you connecting with? Who are you connecting to? and like how they relate to you, like what do people get out of the art that you make. So like for us, like for instance, there's people who's like, hey, I want to be a megastar, so it's like I do pop music because like I want to be a megastar and like appeal to the most amount of people. And there's nothing wrong with that goal inherently. I think what kind of changes is like I make my art for what the people want and like shift to where you have no identity. So like that element of like what is hot is an is actually very subjective. Um, and also depends on where you get your gratification from. So like for us, we have our inherent self gratification of making stuff that resonates with us that like we can see have movements in other people too. You know what I mean? So like, and that's part of the fun of having a band. Like I'll play a chord progression that's whack, right? I think it's good, but then Devin or Doc, our bass player, even sometimes Ty, our drummer, who also can play keys, like he'll be like, "Nah, like you should add these elements of chords and stuff to kind of make it feel a little more fleshed out." And so you can have like a really basic form of an idea, and then when you have other people incorporating their identity into it as well, it makes it flourish a lot more and shine a lot brighter than what if it was a singular idea. And so because of that, I think what happens is when you have like 8 people in a room all agreeing that something's dope, rather than just one guy in a room being like, "Oh yeah, this is heat. I just recorded this in my basement in this heat," and then you throw it out to the world and like they're like, "This is trash." Like maybe maybe all 8 of those people are wrong and it still is trash. Like trust and believe, I've heard some bands where it's like they're all in agreement, like we're dope, and then like they put it out there and it's like nah. But I think when you trust your creative process, you trust that you have really good creatives around you, and then you know that you're making something honest or something that at least can resonate outside of just yourself. Like, because you can make art that's like I know, for instance, Prince is notorious for this. Prince has had whole catalogs of music and whole what's it called? Like archives of unreleased songs that are vaults that's put in a vault. And part of the reason for that is like Prince has like a very eclectic music taste to some degree, to where like when people make the debate between him and Michael Jackson, sometimes the reason why people lean towards Michael Jackson, even though not, no disrespect to Michael, but like he wasn't even really a musician per se, more so just a singer and really dope choreography and dancing and all that. But Michael Jackson inherently was like, I want to make songs that my goal is to get as many people to be dancing with me, right? While Prince is more on like the musicology and musicality of everything, to where Prince will make sonic decisions that like to some people is like, ooh, that sounds really weird, and this tempo is really weird, and I kind of don't know what to do with it. But like to people that are super deep into music, they're like, yo, this is the shit. Like, did you hear that like ninth like that he threw up on there, and then like the way he went from one octave to, so it's like you have different audiences, and if you have everyone in your collective team who has similar or like-mindedness in a sense of how they produce, agrees that something's good, and you can put it out there, you're gonna find some community of people that also enjoy it, and sometimes it's just a matter of making it for them. Um, because even with Snoop, like Snoop's a good example because, for instance, we're seeing this now with the whole Kendrick and like kind of just West Coast like push. Like Snoop is Snoop, Kendrick, like Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, these people have a godlike reverence in LA because their particular style of music really bangs with the West Coast, right? To where some people be like, "Oh, Snoop Dogg isn't that dope of a rapper. Like he's just the actor guy that I see in all the commercials." But then if you go to Oakland and ask about Snoop, they're gonna be like, "Yo, that's like one of the coldest motherfuckers to ever do it." You know what I mean? So there's a thing where like hot is relative. Um, hot is super relative. Even when you go outside the American bubble, like acts from 2000 now they tour in Europe like it's 2002 because it's like people in Europe have so much reverence for the music that they made in the past that they keep rolling there and they're super hot there. But in America, we're so very relevant or not relevant, recency bias to where like they might not check for someone who's like from the 2000s. So hot is so relative, but I get what you mean, where it's just like create stuff that resonates with you, and then it will resonate with people that are like-minded. And that's as far as you can take it, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You mentioned Ev and everyone in the room like kind of agree, or at
Hmm.
least majority vote or something like that. How many
Yeah,
people are in the group total?
that's a fun joint to ask. So, when it comes to the on stage group, we did a calculation. We had to get crunch the numbers. Um, when it comes to the on stage group, there's roughly 11/12.
Okay. I'm glad you
Rough.
didn't use a decimal, but okay, good.
Yeah, there's one member who he lives in Boston. He goes to school in Boston, and he goes to Berkeley. So like he's a guitar player. Shout out to Max Kelly, and you better get your homework in or something. I don't know. I didn't go to college. But like, and honestly, he used to be a student of mine. Like he's a former student of mine that was so talented. I'm like, yeah, you can join the group. Come on, I don't care. Like you're in college now. You're in the band. Cool. Um, but there's 12, and it's a fun time of you have a lot of different personalities. You have a lot of different musical identities and backgrounds that have to like really have a cohesive understanding of there's a thing of like creative there's things like creative conflict and like sometimes like I'm sure you hear this about like directors, like you'll hear a director leaving a movie project and they'll be like, oh, there were creative differences, right? We Branch Station like kind of treats we treat like creative differences and like conflict not as something to be super scared of, but actually something to embrace because it can sometimes lead to better ideas. It's almost like I put it more so akin to how how in the way I'd put it is this. You know how our government kind of works and there's like two sides, right? There's an element of the sad part is that you should realize that on if the government was actually working in service of the people, obviously that's a big prerequisite too. Like, yes, we have different views of how we want something to be done, but at the end of the day, the thing that we want to be done is relatively the same. So, like, on a political sense, we want our country to be prosperous, have prosperity, and we want people to be living good lives, and we want to be the best country we can possibly be. That's the goal. I think we should do it this way. I think we should do it that way. But then, like, we're all on the same team is how things should work, and that's kind of how Branch Station works in the sense of how we dictate, um, like what creative ideas land and what creative ideas don't. And it's a fun thing where I think when we last talked, I told you like how I'm the leader of Branch, but I don't like be like I'm the leader and this is like it's a very collective process, and it leads to really cool outcomes where the creative conflicts lead to creative solutions that like sometimes have a mix of both or just having like music debates where it's kind of like you state your case, they state their case, we listen to it, we see how the rest of the group thinks about it, we talk about it, and then we figure out what we're going to go with. And sometimes those songs end up becoming the doper songs, like a fun one in the sense of like just how there's no like power structure within Branch per se. Like there's a song on there called I Don't Want You. It was originally Devin Reed had the prompt for the song, and it was like a relationship song, right? He wrote that, and then during the time of us making this project, I have written three different verses to try to get on that song. I wrote three different verses to try to get on that song because I really was like, oh, I really feel like I have like this idea. But like there was a thing where Devin's like, hey, I have like this certain perspective and I have this certain vantage point or perspective on how I view relationships that's very different from how you view relationships. And so sometimes when you're writing about like relationships, it feels like it's clashing to some degree. And like I had to respect it because when he explained where it was coming from and like how he views stuff, it's like, yeah, we're two diametrically opposite in the sense of how we view relationships. So like this particular song is about relationships. And then as we kept going through the process of making the project, it turned into a thing where one of the newer members who joined, his name is Matt Fattiroti, who's a super dope lyricist and songwriter. Like his his perspective on relationships very much aligned with how Dev viewed relationship. And then when he wrote his verse for that song, he's the second verse on that song, and he has this beautiful tone and like vocal stacking techniques that he does that just makes stuff sound really lush. When he did that on the song, mind you, I wrote three verses already. I was like, nah, that's it. Like that was so heat, like for Snoop, like that was so hot that I don't even give a shit that I'm not on this song at all. Like, no, that was it. Like we found someone that linked with the concept and executed it perfectly for what the song was calling for. And like we have mad scenarios like that where it's just like sometimes even giving creative time. Like if we had put the album out when it was in what I'd call demo phase, pre us making the decision to wait till we could record it in person, like we wouldn't have like a Matt Fatarotti on there because we wouldn't have met him yet. Um, and we wouldn't. So it's just like there's some beauty in having those dialogues and revision. It's almost like judo. Like I don't know if you ever done like jujitsu or judo, where like it's like grappling and you know sometimes you get tapped, but like you get better from it and you guys shake hands and it's like it's cool. It's kind of like that. Like sometimes I get my verses taken off of stuff and it's like I wasn't feeling this, and it's like all right, let's figure out what is the thing you want to feel and go from there.
So how do you approach that? Writing a whole verse, or I'm sure it happens on an album with as many songs as this has.
Mhm.
Um, a verse not making it right. I'm sure there are probably songs that didn't make it either. You put all
Mhm.
that time and effort into a verse or into a chorus or whatever it is, and you're like, nah. What happens to that, or what are the feelings after
Yeah.
that?
So here's the fun, and it really goes into what we talked about in the last interview. Like I was myself in the beginning, and then also like the collective group as a whole now has an understanding of like the identity and mission when it comes to Branch Station. We were very particular about picking people who were very talented, but also have the right, um, I'll say, mentality when it comes to creating. Because there's people you run into that are great and brilliant artists and like much love to them, but you can also tell that like if the song doesn't go their way, then it's like I don't want to do this. And like for those individuals, sometimes it makes sense for them to make their own band, and they get people that have the mentality that might be, oh, I kind of am more someone who like follows and wants to take instruction from a music director or band leader than like have my own identity, right? And to some degree that's easier to control because like for instance if I was making this album right by myself or if I was just contracting all the members of Branch to be on it and then like I was just like no I want to have my version of this, like if everyone that I picked had the mentality of oh well we just kind of listen to what the leader says, then it will happen that way and that's cool, you might make a really cool song, but like I already know from just my experience being in Branch, when we have the creative conflict, the friction creates sparks that makes something beautiful. That's a lot different than what it would have been if it was just me calling the shots. So what really happens is that we're very selective with who we get in our group. We're pretty much maxed out now. I don't think we can have any more people join, honestly. um, but all of those people have temperaments to where when we met and interacted prior to them joining, and then obviously with the OG members as well, like we just had this groove and vibe of just like we like creative dialogue. We don't like creative monologues, right? So like there'll be things where Dev will have his perspective from being the Berkeley trained musician, like oh these are the technical things, and that's his background. And then I'll be like, nah, this just like gutturally, this doesn't feel like it has the same resonance as putting the chords here or making it have this texture or this sound. And when we debate, it's just a thing of like we're having a dialogue and a discussion to create something dope. And when someone's idea doesn't get put in, no one takes it harshly because they understand that like one, we pick the temperament of people that aren't going to be disrespectful creatively. Like we're not going to be like your idea is stupid. Like sometimes me and Dev will call each other's ideas stupid, but that's just the nature of our relationship. But like we really do take in everyone's input and try to figure out a way to amalgamize stuff to some degree of having multiple people's input, but also there's an element of the maturity, and that's what I really love my band for, is like as us kind of being like more of a family unit in the sense of how we roll, how we hang out. We have debates about all different types of things, and no one ever takes it personally. No one ever gets upset. Like we don't have like arguments or like band fallout fights. Like it's really we just like discussing and like having dialogues about anything. So when it comes to our music, it's the same deal. And like sometimes you might have a debate about a topic, you can agree to disagree, and then like if more people side with one idea than another idea, it's never a fallout issue just because of the temperament and the mentality of the individuals that we've collected over the years, in the sense of putting into this collective.
Yeah. No, I think that's. I mean, in my perspective, sounds absolutely overwhelming. Trying to well, do you guys write in a group of 12 or in smaller groups, or do you come up with ideas and then bring them to the larger scale
um,
theater?
so we go in particular, and this is actually the fun part because uh, Devin and Jadalay are like on the mission of while I'm focused on WeGo and just promoting that, they have to kind of formulate what the next project's gonna kind of look like. Because mind you, this is our first big album. Like we've made some small projects and like in like little small pockets. Um, like they're gonna have to figure out what does it look like when we make an album and we're not in a pandemic. Like we're all here at the same time. And a big thing for me personally is like I like giving all the musicians prompts or allowing them to give us prompts as the writers, to kind of give like a canvas for which they want everyone else to paint on, right? So part of it is like some people have more vision than others on particular topics. Like we have a member of our group now, her name's Alea Johnson, and she's like an active, like, and I mean like active activist. You know what I mean? Like not like the I just post something on Instagram and like she's like in the streets, megaphone, yelling at people, possibly risking life and limb sometimes. And for her, she has like certain topics that like just resonate with her. So like when we made the song Freedom and we put her on it, it was just like it was like letting a bull out of like the cage or whatever. Like she just went and like just burrowed through that song because that just resonate with who she is in her being, like a song about freedom as someone that actively is trying to help other people get free. Like she does stuff when it comes to like Free Mamua, who is like kind of like a political activist that's being held in jail like for like just reasons. Like basically we know that he didn't do anything, but like, it was in the past, he's been arrested, so it's whatever. But like when we gave her that song Freedom, she's just like, yo, this is my thing. So to some degree the prompts are given by individual members and then the songwriters will write to it and then like we'll just start to craft an identity from there. And then other times, like a big thing that Branch Station has, I think I talked to you about it, like we have the Second Street Music Jam, where that is actually modeling our freestyle improv songwriting process. And so that one's actually really easy because that one is just like, a bass player starts off with a bass line, and then a drummer will start to groove with that keys, and everyone starts to kind of just groove on this impromptu thing. And then as singers and songwriters, we'll just write based off of what they gave us. And like in the moment, like it's not a thing of like everyone go to their separate corners and sit down and think, but like in the moment we'll write a song and you know, we'll we'll make a song in front of people like we do it on stage, literally now. But like that process also is one that like can just kind of be like a very natural cohesion of multiple identities because like when someone plays an instrument, they're expressing themselves and their identity in a certain way. So you can play the same bass line for 15 different drummers and they might play 15 different ways, you know? So that's their input and identity. And then with the songwriters, like you might have someone who like when they hear that initial beat, they got a chorus in mind off rip. Like they know what their chorus is. Like they just hear it. They feel it. A lot of times for myself, even at the jam, like one of our guitar players, dope ass guitar player Tim Spence, he'll play licks based on like how he sings stuff out, like on guitar, and I'll listen to those licks and just hear how he's clearly voicing his voice, and I'll be like, all right, I'll just write a chorus based off what the guitar's doing, and I call it piggybacking. But like when we write songs in that manner, there's not even really a debate. We're communing musically in real time, and then once the chorus gets made, that chorus sets a tone for what the song is about, and then all the other vocalists might freestyle a verse with that chorus in mind, so they're writing based on that prompt or subject in their in their own style. And then you just get really dope music out of that, where it's like we all had this musical discussion with just straight music to make a song concept. So like when we sit down and write, yes, you have to sometimes have specific people bring stuff. But when we do the collective jam process of writing a song, it's just like, hey, we just had a discussion for 10 minutes musically, and then what the product of that was this song, you know?
So how many of these songs off the album came from like distilling down uh the parts you really liked from jams?
So here's the thing, and this is how old this project is too, which is fun. In the time of, so we actually had an album. It's a project called Painting on the Fly, right? And that was one where we met up outside mid-pandemic and just was like mask and social distancing, all that stuff. And this is around the time when I like could go outside again a little bit, not too much though. Um, and that album we made it, and it was a thing where it was entirely jam orientated, right? And then I did tell the group that we were gonna put out this thing called Pan on the Fly, but like for some reason, like I was still learning as a leader how to communicate better. But like we put it out, and then everyone collectively, everyone in the group was like, "Oh man, what the fuck? I thought we were gonna re-record that, and like now it's just out there, and we sound like we're just doing a practice." And mind you, part of it is my naivety in the sense of me not being a musician. I'm hearing this and being like, yo, this is the dopest thing I ever heard because I'm just learning how to play instruments. And then from their perspective, they're like, man, we were playing outside in the cold in October. My hands were like tight and like you can hear me playing the wrong chords. I didn't have the ears for that yet. But um the beautiful thing is I think when we put that project out, originally the idea was to put Painting on the Fly out, then put With Everything Going On out after that, because it will just be like a primer project, right? Um but that Painting on the Fly project like really influenced, like I was like, what everyone collectively said in the group was, can we do the Pinning on the Fly project, but can we do it over again? And like we take the rough demos and then you know construct them a bit more. I guess would be what they kind of put it as, right? So for most of We Go, right, most of the songs on there are songs that were kind of like we had the demo version and then like someone had a prompt to make it, and then we took it over to the studio when we finally decided, and that was also the big influence was like I'm like, hey, these are all songs we made remotely. Let's, and you guys talked about how you didn't like how Pain on the Fly, it felt like we weren't all locked in on the concept yet. Let's wait till we get all the way out of the pandemic to like put this all together. So most of the songs are prompt songs that we eventually re-recorded. However, some of the improv songs, the two that are the most fun, is "Be Here" and "Sirens." I think I would describe as like the two improv songs where there wasn't a prompt for them. We just kind of wrote them and then made the songs. "Be Here" is super fun because it's actually a little bit of an older song where when Devin was first joining the group, it's one of the first choruses he wrote actually. And I personally think it's probably going to be one of our, if you want to say like hit songs. Like the music video for that's about to be crazy, and then like the energy of it, of just like how much it resonates with people, where it's just like I don't really want to be here right now. There's a lot of different scenarios you can throw that into, where it's like you're at school, I don't want to be here right now. You're at work, I don't want to be here. But we were just jamming, and like he was playing trumpet at the time, and like we was vibing, I was freestyling, doing whatever, and then he started playing this lick on the trumpet, right? And he was like, and he's playing that, and I'm hearing that, and I'm like about to do my piggyback thing, and I'm like trying to figure out what to put over top of it. But then he put his trumpet down, and he's just like, I don't really want to be here right now, and it's just like, oh, that shit's it, that's hot, yes, and like it's just collectively everyone in the room's like, ah, and then it's just like you all agreed on that being it in one moment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah. So,
oh, you got it.
no, I was just saying that's awesome. You know that it was a unanimous decision without having to say any words. Really, it's just
Mhm.
that's it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was listening through the album, so you may know this, you may not, but I used to do a album review podcast before this.
Really?
Like, yeah, for like 2 years I did it with Jack and Seamus, Dan Grogan, Inky.
Oh, shout out
Um,
to all of them, especially Seamus. That's the homie.
yeah. So coming into this, I was getting back in my mindset of approaching it like this, and the first thing I would do whenever I listen to an album is the first time I just listen through, not paying attention a ton, just taking a note of each song that I liked.
Mm.
And I started listening through, and I'm like, it's like, oh, I like this song, I like this song. I get through the album, I have like every song on there, and
Let's
I was like,
go.
okay, well, well, I guess I might as well not even keep track, but I I had a feeling that the Siren Scream song was a jam. I
Yeah.
could tell just because something about it just felt so in the moment, and the way the phonetics of the words matched the rhythms and the melody. I was like,
Hmm.
that was came up on the spot while they were jamming for sure.
Yeah, and it's still a thing where we had time to, still record them later. But Sirens is one of those songs where, and it's honestly, and this is again about that time capsule element of that I kind of really love about this project. I started Branch Station inside of a shed in my cousin's house, who I was living with at the time, kind of like in like the King of Prussia area, and that shed was like home for us to just really like experiment and do these jams and just make stuff like really just make whatever in like a really free environment. And like we have a lot of love for that shed. And sadly, my cousin had to move out. I moved out once the pandemic hit. um and the people that moved in, and I'm mad at these people too, I don't know who they are, but I'm mad at you. They knocked the whole shed down and just made it a parking spot. So like, so Sirens is a song where that was written in the shed, um, pre-pandemic, and then we're putting it on this album because it fits the tone of like this kind of fearing of the impending doom of what we're going through, but also like has this element of like how much we cling on to life that I think is a big thing that I kind of felt in this project and kind of how I perceive it. But Sirens, literally, we were in the shed, and I believe we were working on one of Devin's original records. And it was a thing where I had Devin recording me. He was playing keys. I was on mic, and he armed the what did he arm? He armed the recording button for the microphone so I could hear the mic. And at this time, mind you, we're recording in a shed, and we're right next to I guess I-76, where we're right next to an exit on I-76, and I just heard sirens in the background, right? And so I was just like, I could hear the siren scream. I could hear the siren scream, right? And then just off that little prompt, Dev was like, wait, hold up, keep doing that. And then he starts playing keys. He figures out like a chord progression to it. And I think I still had the recording on my phone because we did this a lot earlier on when we were first developing song concept. We recorded on the phone just so we have like the raw feeling of what it felt like in the moment making that song, and then we'll go and actually record the record to be like right. But in the recording, I literally like spell out what the story of Siren Scream is gonna be about, and then I like went home and just wrote that out. But it's just like, yeah, we jammed that song out in like a 30-second increment of just like us agreeing like, here's a story, here's a chorus, here's a chord progression, just in a whirlwind, and then like we got used to playing it, and then we went and recorded it. And Sirens is just one of those songs where it's like, I feel like it captures a lot of the essence of what Branch like aspires to be, because it has this element of darkness in the sense of the subject matter, but then it also has a little bit of like this like jovial bounce to it, to where like it feels weird to kind of like be grooving to it. Um, and then it has these peaks and valleys, and it's just there's like this beautiful, there's beauty in it, there's darkness in it, and then there's like the kinetic force of just like how aggressive some parts are, and it's all encapsulated in this one thing. So like definitely one of the elements of jam songs is you can get a lot of ideas from like how extensive a jam can be, and then you can condense it into something that's really has a lot of depth to it, you know?
Hmm. Do you have a favorite memory from recording after you guys, wrote stuff spread out across the pandemic and other times, and you came together to
Favorite?
record stuff?
Huh. Let me see. So, I have a lot. I have a lot. But the most beautiful thing about the project for me, from a very personal, like being the person who worked in this collective to make it, um, there was a lot of growth and development for everyone as individuals, as humans, but also musically. And the big one for me, man, was that on the song "Be Here" and on the song "Hummingbirds," the vocal on it was one of our bass players. His name's Doc O'Corey, and for a real long time, pre us doing the project, I'm like, Doc, I can hear it in your voice. You should be like an independent artist as well. So like obviously you have myself who puts out music, you have Devin who puts out music, you have Joey who puts out music. We're gonna eventually get every member this year and going into next year to put out projects. But I'm like, Doc, you are like one of the greatest bass players I know. Like everyone recognizes you for your bass talent. Like you should just have songs of your own to put out with you as the artist, and I think like the world would follow you. Like I really think the world of what Doc could be as an artist. And in the process of us starting this album, he was just playing bass. But over the years, there was some spots that like we had to fill like on verses, and there's things where like mind you, I've written a verse for pretty much every song on this album, but like with the understanding that like not my verse, you're not gonna have a verse from me on every single one. It's just like the process of like, hey, we have a song bed, you guys write to it. But when Doc actually would go to Second Street, the studio that we work out of, and he would meet up with Kylie, the owner of Second Street. When he he sent me a voice memo with him putting a verse on one of the Brand Station songs, where I was like, yeah, like I was punching walls and like throwing like I was through the moon, and it was a thing where it was like, yo, like this is what I knew he was capable of, and I was like I could see it in you. And then for him to like have that initiative to just be like, hey, I'm gonna put a verse on here, and then like he put two verses on the song, and now there's people reaching out to him for him to do verses on their songs now. And I was like, bro, I told you. So like that's one of the big ones that are is like internal, where it's just like seeing that growth of someone that you've been working with and you think so highly of, and you think they have such versatility, and like you just want to see them explore it. And then when you see that happen and it creates something, because like Doc's Hummingbird verse for me is like one of the ones like I get more excited about my members' verses than I get about some of my own. But like that's one of them where I'm just like he comes on the voice and he sounds cool as shit. He sounds cool as shit. He's like, I live in a dream, always worry about the cream. Out here living check to check, but hood famous. I'm like, like there's nothing that tops that feeling just seeing your homie be great. Like even greater than you already like be greater than what you thought he even could be. He's exceeding that. You know what I mean? And so it's just awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of great verses and a lot of great singers on this project. Um,
Appreciate it.
I want to take a step away from the music for just a second because I am
Sure.
really curious about the album cover. It's beautiful.
Oh,
The coloring
I'm
is
done.
beautiful. The typography is beautiful. Tell me a story.
So here's what happened. Uh, Halloween 2023. Second Street had a Halloween jam that we were hosting, and the Halloween jam was surrounded by an art show that was going to be an exhibit of this. There's a street graffiti artist named Irregular, and I don't know when's the last time you've been to Philly, but he's in New York. He's in a few different spots. He travels. He does art, but he did a show at our at our jam, and his artwork is just spectacular. Like I truly do really just appreciate the level of like creativity, and then also just like the like from having met him, hearing the pathology of how he kind of like thinks about like how he wants to angle certain stuff that he makes. And so for people like I don't know if you're gonna put the artwork up here in like a cut or not, but like that artwork is an actual art piece from him. So what happened was that like I said, Halloween, I'm like, yo, this art is incredible. And he does these beautiful murals with mirrors. So it's reflective and it shows back at you, but there's also paintings incorporated in it. And like I was like, yo, I should have him make the album art for We Go. And I was like that was in my mind. I'm just like, that's what's gonna happen. We're gonna make that happen. Now, mind you, like I said, he's a street artist. The people that work at Second Street, one of the other organizations is Weak Sauce. They're a hot sauce company that works out of our building. um, they got him on board to do the art show originally. So I'm like, yo, Ryan, that's one of the owners. I was like, yo, I gotta get in contact with Irregular. And I wanted to get to him early because like when you see his artwork, it's glass and mirrors just cut and I'm like, I don't know how long that takes to produce, but I know I want to have his artwork ready so that way when we're ready to drop our song, he can do that, right? And then Ryan's like, oh yeah, I'll get you his number, XYZ, right? Um, and then I message him and I tell him like, hey, I really want to work on this thing. Nothing, nothing, no response. And like I tried messaging him like a few more times, and I'm just like, he just don't mess with me. He's just like, who is this guy? I don't like, oh whatever, I guess. And so like multiple months pass, and it gets into 2024, and then it's a thing where I'm just like, well, I gotta figure out what I'm doing to artwork because like we're getting close to this thing being ready to roll, and like I couldn't get in contact with him. But then Kylie and Ryan reached out to him, and they were like, "Yo, you know the guy that like was hosting the Irregular Jam? Like he's like really trying to get in contact with you, and also we're gonna try to do another jam. So if you want to do another October jam, feel free." And he was like, "Oh, that guy! I love that guy. Like I love like his hosting. I love how he teaches people how to freestyle. I want to go to his freestyle classes." And I'm all like, "Bro, I could have talked to you months ago." But then here's the beautiful thing, and it's just about that thing about timing and everything is like, during that time period of us from like uh from the irregular jam that was in 2023 to the irregular jam that was October 31st, 2024, we actually got new members that joined the group and added verses to these songs. Like we brought other people on board that put verses on those songs to where I think the reason why like we didn't get it in 2023 or start making it ahead of time is because we got these new members. And then that gave time for them to put their verses and be a part of the system. And literally Matt Fatorochi, the dude with the really incredible voice, he came to the Second Street Jam. The first time he came was the same day the regular show happened. So it's just like there's some synchronicity that kind of happens. And so that art piece, literally, I want to say he made it in less than a week, and it was very impressive to me because like like my two disciplines artistically that I like lack the most in, dance, can't dance, and then visual arts in the sense of drawing. I can't draw anything. I can't like I can write with both my hands, but I can't draw. Very upsetting. Um, but he made it in 2 weeks. It's this beautiful art piece, and then it has these mirrors in it, and I was just like, how dope would it be if like we take a picture of the art piece and the rest of the band members are inside of the artwork for real, right? And so Kylie, the studio owner, secretary, she's all like, "Oh, you could just you could what's it called? Photoshop people in there. Like, it's gonna be like really difficult." But I was like, I just had a vision about it. I was like, "Nah, I want it to be for real." And so I talked with my pops, who's a videographer. Shout out to my pops, and he's a videographer and photographer. Taught me a lot about photography. And I was like, hey, how can we like make an angled photo where we can fit everybody in? And we came up with a game plan. So literally, it's a thing where like the camera person's here, the art person's kind of in front like a triangle, and then we were kind of like a little bit to the right for the camera to kind of tilt, and everyone had to like be real still and get in position, and then we got the photo, and then it was just like when I looked at it, I was just like, this is definitely Branch, like because there's that thing about like us about the authenticity of art, and just for a personal effect, like there's a real amount of joy and like happiness I kind of get as the fact that someone could see our cover art and potentially also see it in the real world. Like I think if one Branch Station like builds to what I believe it's going to be, Like eventually that art piece might be in like museums. It might be somewhere where like someone could be like, oh, this is the with everything going on artwork that was made in 2024 by Irregular in collaboration with Branch Station, and it's just a real tactile thing. Like that I love that about it. And then if you want, I could talk about like what kind of went into the design, and then the other thing is Irregular doesn't normally do interviews, but like when he's in a private convo about stuff, it's really interesting how he perceives it.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to hear about kind of the behind the scenes went into what went into the concept of the artwork.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that when I was really listening to the album and when I was talking with the group about like what like is representative of with everything going on, there was a lot of like spiral imagery in my head just of when you think about like the dizziness and the noise of what kind of like goes on in life, like there was a lot of spiral imagery that just kind of stuck with me. So like when I was talking with Irregular, we had a member of the group, Internet Sage. He took a photo outside of Second Street, like on the balcony, that was just of a sunset, and I was like, that's probably gonna be the cover art. And then time progressed, and then we meet Irregular, and I'm like, okay, I want to kind of show like, yo, here's where we're at, literally a vantage point of where we're from. Like when you look at that artwork, you're looking out the balcony of Second Street, like the place where the band really started to like become cohesive, and where we ultimately recorded the album itself too. So like that was a key piece in the sense of the showing of Philadelphia and showing like a part of the skyscrapers of Philadelphia, and then also just showing a snapshot and a picture and a moment in time of like, hey, here's where we were at during this time in our lives. And then when you think about pandemic, life, and just all the stuff that kind of goes into projects, because so much stuff happens to people during creative processes that can take a few years. Like, there's family members where, and I referenced this on Half Speed, like there's family members where like I was making this music with the hope that they might be able to hear it before they go, and then, people pass away. So there's so much happening, and it just feels like a whirlwind. To where when I talk to Irregular about incorporating because his signature is the mirrored artwork. So when I talked to him about incorporating it, I was like, I want to have some form of spiral that's inside of it, right? And then the other thing that we kind of talked about was like once he made the spiral, showed me like the demo of it. I was like, that's cool, but I feel like there should be something like on the sides. And he's like cutting up pieces of like mirror and just like trying out different things and trying out all these deals. But then he kind of had this thing where he cut things out to be stars, right? And um the way it kind of resonated with me, and to some degree it's like, you kind of find ways to make um to like art is interpretive, so some ways some things represent something to you more than they might to someone else or something like that, right? But when he made those stars, like it was kind of it was reminiscent, at least for me, of like how Lion King, for instance, like you have like all the kings and the stars and whatnot, and like I was really thinking about like how many people had passed away in the midst of this process of us making the project on like a personal level, from like the individuals in the group who've lost grandparents, individuals who've lost friends, like in the midst of us doing this. And like I'm pretty sure, and like it's a thing where there's 3 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars, and 3 stars. Like roughly about like 9 people that were really close to us did pass away in the process of making this. So when I saw the 9, I was kind of like, that kind of feels right, and that's what it represents to me. Now, when Irregular made it, he was just putting stars that look cool, but it's again that thing of connecting with people on art, like it can just resonate with you and touch a certain point of you. And so for me, like that's kind of where the stars come from, and that's what they kind of represent in my mind. It's like those lights in the sky that represent people. And so it's just like everything's going on. Don't forget about the people you came from, and then like here's a snapshot of where we were, Second Street, and all that like kind of combines to make something that I think really looks. I'll say it. It might be a little, I don't know, big headed, but I think it looked iconic, and I'm hoping that like it inspires other people to be like, yo, how do we make our cover art like a thing, like a piece in itself? You know what I mean?
Absolutely, no, it is iconic. The color scheme, the design, I think it's no one's gonna mistake it for anything else, especially when even if you're just thinking logically or pragmatically, and you got that little square in Spotify or Apple Music or something,
Hmm.
how can you make that little square as signature and as unique and interesting as possible? And I think you guys definitely nailed it.
I appreciate that a lot, man.
Yeah,
Because cover art sometimes is the hardest thing. Because sometimes people are like, "Oh, make it super simple," and then like sometimes like,
yeah,
"Oh, make it too abstract." And I think we made it complicated, but like it has a simplicity to it at the same time.
yeah. No, it's beautiful.
Appreciate it.
So, what is going on now that with everything going on is out to the world? How are you guys promoting it? What other events are you guys doing?
So the biggest thing happening currently is that we are establishing our connections to some other festivals and also establishing our connection to some other venues outside of Philadelphia, which is like the big move for us. So back to the jam. Well, one, the Second Street Jam, we finally named it. So it's called Back to the Jam officially, and that's actually a name of one of the songs that we made during the first season of making jams. So that's going to be a regular event, and then we're also connecting with Two Locals Brewing in it says like 36 and Market, where we're probably going to have some form of a residency and regularly doing music jams there. And then this week, actually, we're going to the National Association of Music Manufacturing, the NAMM convention in California. So there's a few festivals and shows that we're doing in California. We're going to be doing like an outside jam, I believe on the 20. Don't quote me on this. On the 26th, we're doing like an outside jam, and then also when we come back to Philly, we are going to be doing the Two Locals Brewing. And the biggest thing that's kind of been in the works right now is, we're starting to have social media teams that we work with. We're having marketing managers that we're working with to kind of push the album, and we're the big push that's going to be coming soon is Branch Station is actually going to be doing some form of a free library tour, because obviously, like with the conversation we're having about other generations, like a lot of people in Branch Station are educators in some capacity. Some of us actually worked in the school system. Some of us have taught our craft to other people. So, like a big thing that we kind of want to push this summer, and working with one of our partners and also a member of ours, Alea Johnson. She works for a group that's called Black Alliance for Peace, and their big thing is literacy and doing book campaigns and free library drives, free library card drives, and things of that nature. So we're actually going to be doing a lot of in-city free shows for kids, but it's also for adults too. Just to kind of like have an opportunity to come to do workshops to learn how to play instruments, and then at night we're gonna actually have like some jams combined with Burn Station shows and us doing our live sets. So it's like everything's kind of in the preliminary stages of getting the shows together. Like the most pressing thing is the thing that's going to be happening in California. And then like we'll have the jam regularly happening in February 1st. The last Tuesday in February is going to be like the first Back to the Jam show, and then a lot. Oh, this is the big one though. I'm forgetting the most important thing. Um, there's a thing that's going to be called We Go the Movie, or with everything going on the movie, and basically throughout 2025 to 2026, we're going to take every song on the album and we're going to make some form of video project around it, whether it be vignette short films, traditional music videos, or even some like visualizer or something more I guess like abstract. But Wego is gonna have a whole entire video project to go with alongside the music um that will be coming out this year, and it'll be coming out in increments so that like continues to promote the project. But then when it's finally finalized, I know that once we have the movie finished and the movie's finished and then the album's out, we are going to actually do a vinyl release of our album, like as a box set that will come with the movie, the vinyl, and probably some other trinkets as well that like kind of are representative of Branch Station. And then by the time we're like in early 2026, who knows, maybe the next Branch Station album may be out. But I definitely know every member in the group will have some songs out this year, because that's the big focus now. It's like let's get everyone else to have their projects out while this album's out and doing what it does.
So that's exciting stuff. I think, especially the physical vinyl. That
Hmm.
that cover art is going to look beautiful in person. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
I
Very
think
excited for that part.
the visual, videography aspect, a lot of this album is very, tangible and visceral. So I think it'll pair well. Pretty exciting stuff. Pretty
Appreciate it,
exciting.
man.
There's still a lot going on, huh?
Yo, it don't stop. I was telling it was funny because my band they tend to get on me about it, but it's something I really can't I can't take my foot off of, I guess. Uh, Kobe Bryant has this really iconic um interview that he did where they won, I think, game two of the uh the finals against, I want to say, Orlando. And the interviewer was like asking him, he was like, "Well, you guys won game two. Like, are you excited?" And Kobe was just like, "Job's not finished." It's like, but if you win two, like, you're on the trajectory to like kind of win, so you can kind of get, job's not done. The thing, and it was funny throughout the years of like me, like, cause I started teaching, I started doing so much stuff when this album was like being made. For a lot of us, like, it's like, oh, the album being out is the finish line, like we did it, yeah. But for me, I look at the album being out as the midway point. We won game two. There's two more games we got to win, and that's promoting it, and then that's also like getting it to really um resonate with people in a way to where, like, I think this album has the potential to potentially be the Kickstarter for us, because Branch Station has this ultimate goal of pushing live music into the mainstream sphere of, like, hopefully by 2045 kids are just as inclined to pick up a microphone as they are inclined to also pick up a drum set, or I don't not pick up a drum set, a drumstick, I guess. Just ugh.
That's
But
what
like,
the instrument.
yeah, but like that's kind of also like the mission behind us too. So it's like, how do we get this to really resonate? And then, like, even with the thing like us doing workshops, like, how do we push it to the youth that, like, yo, this album that you're hearing, like, this was made as a group of people. And I know you guys are used to kind of seeing, oh, I love this rapper, and like he's the rapper, he's the cool guy, he's the rapper. But it's like, nah, like, get your friends, have your friends, and you guys can all make something together, and you guys all shine in some way, rather than just being like, yo, I'm the cool rapper guy, and like it's only me by myself. No one helped me. Like, nah, make community, man. Make something together with the people that you're close to. You know what I mean? So those are the two. Game three, get it promoted. Game four, get it to inspire. You know.
Very cool. Any other things I didn't bring up that you wanted to mention?
What I will say is, Branch Station is the best hip hop band I think in Philadelphia that's like currently playing. I'm gonna keep pushing that, and then I think, like, one, I do want to say, Nigel, I appreciate you for doing these interviews, because they're really, one, I enjoy just doing interviews and talking with people, and like the fact that we went on a whole tangent about AI, and like that's shit I live for. um, but like I thank you for like highlighting this, and then also just the fact that you're going around and doing these thought exchanges, because even how, like, I'm curious what your mission statement is for what you want thought exchange to be, because in the episodes I have watched, it is a really cool thing where you're kind of doing interviews that are more so about getting the pathology of how people think about what they do. And I think it's super important, because a lot of people, they see X or they see Y, they see an actor, they see a musician, they see an influencer, and they're just like, oh, that's just what they do. But it's like, so much methodology and thought has to go into what we create as artists and what we create as pundits or what we create as videographers, that like having that display of people's thought process that can potentially inspire other people to be like, oh, I never thought about it this way, and just changing their perspective on what they do and how they think about what they do is super dope. So I appreciate you for thought exchange, and the fact that you're at a year now and like continuously doing this is super awesome, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, the goal is, the world we live in is chaotic, with
Mm-hmm.
everything going
With
on.
everything going on.
It can be overwhelming, and it's easy to get lost, I think. So, one of the main goals of Thought Exchange is just, if I can provide any kind of insight and avenue into, like, here are some ways that people live their lives, or some ways that people find meaning or passion or whatever it may be, um, in the never-ending bombardment of content that we talked about earlier. Like here are some things that people actually care about, that people are actually interested in, and have found a way to design their lifestyle to incorporate. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, I'm happy to have you on the show. I'm glad you could come on. I love the album. I love the album
appreciate
art.
it.
I'm excited to see the visual stuff and all the other projects that come along with the future of Branch Station and yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, next time we got to do this in person, though. I know that's what I'm excited for. Anytime you're in Philly, like I'll coordinate us for us to film in real life because I know that's definitely gonna be a fun one.
For sure. That sounds good. Well, thanks for
Mhm.
coming on. Everyone, stream with everything going on by Branch Station. It's out Spotify, Apple
Pretty,
Music,
pretty much everywhere. You
yeah,
can even
anywhere
listen to
you
it on
listen to
YouTube.
music. Yeah. Um, yeah. Thanks for coming on, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much for watching and listening today. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow to keep up to date with new content as it comes out. I appreciate your support and encourage you to exchange your thoughts in the comments below. As always, keep an open mind.